I remember waking up that morning with this strange mix of excitement and, I don't know, nervous anticipation. My sister's wedding. It was supposed to be one of those perfect days, the kind you see in movies, where everyone's happy and nothing goes wrong. And honestly, I wanted it to be perfect for her. She deserved that. Walking into the venue, the first thing that hit me was the smell of fresh flowers, roses, lilies, some sweet scent I couldn't quite place. The hall was buzzing softly with chatter, laughter spilling out from the main room. I caught the glint of sunlight bouncing off champagne glasses, and for a second, I let myself relax. This was a day about celebration, love, family. And yet, there was this little knot in my stomach. Maybe it was nothing, just my mind running ahead. But I couldn't shake it. Family events always had a way of bringing up those old, quiet insecurities. Would anyone notice the work I'd done, the hours I'd sacrificed, the things I'd accomplished? Or was this just another reminder that no matter what I did, some people only ever saw my sister? I tried to shake it off. I told myself, today isn't about work, it's about family. And it's about her. But the mind has a funny way of wandering. I flashed back to when we were kids, the two of us sprawled on the living room carpet, giggling over some ridiculous board game. She always won, of course, but I didn't mind. Not then, not always. That feeling of closeness was warm, comforting, something I'd carried with me even as we grew older. Yet, somewhere beneath that warmth, a tiny whisper of competition had always lingered. Little things. Who got the bigger slice of cake at birthday parties? Whose art project got pinned on the fridge? Nothing huge, nothing anyone else would notice. But I noticed, and it mattered. Just a little dot. I took a deep breath as I walked further into the venue. The wedding invitations were displayed on a polished oak table, soft cream paper, elegant gold lettering. I ran my fingers over the embossed edges without really thinking, letting the calm of the moment sink in. Laughter echoed from the hallways. Someone popped a cork somewhere, and the sharp, crisp scent of champagne floated toward me. For the first time, I let myself smile properly. That it felt good to be here. Really good. Like maybe, just maybe, everything would be as perfect as it seemed on the surface. I thought I'd blend into the wedding, soak in the joy, and feel proud of my sister. But then it happened. The moment I realized I wasn't supposed to be part of the celebration. Not really. They sat me in the kitchen. The kitchen. Not a corner near the guests, not a table with my family. Just the kitchen. I remember staring at the arrangement for a beat too long, thinking, surely this is a mistake. But the laughter from the main hall seeped through the swinging doors, and I knew it wasn't that at first. I tried to laugh it off. I smiled politely at the staff passing trays of hors d'oeuvres, nodded at the few relatives who glanced my way. But inside, this weird twist of confusion and embarrassment was curling around my ribs. My mind ran through every possibility. Was there a last-minute change? Did someone forget? Or worse, was this intentional? I sipped my lukewarm cup of coffee and watched the wedding from the doorway, the sight of my sister glowing in her dress. Surrounded by people I recognized, but somehow felt more distant than ever. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, even the soft classical music, it all felt like it was happening to someone else, someone who belonged there. And me? I was invisible. A memory surfaced suddenly, unbidden. A family dinner years ago, where my sister had received endless praise for something trivial, her new dress, a project at school, while my own efforts went unnoticed. I remembered forcing a smile, stuffing my pride down, convincing myself. It didn't matter. It doesn't matter. You'll get your moment. But apparently, some things never changed. I looked around the kitchen, at the bland fluorescent lights and stacks of dirty plates waiting to be cleared, and felt this sharp, almost physical sting of exclusion. The wedding, the celebration, the joy, all of it was happening around me, but I was tucked away, a spectator in my own family story. I remember thinking, how many times have I smiled through this? How many times have I let myself be sidelined? Because it seemed easier than arguing? The anger was there, simmering quietly behind the embarrassment. But for now, I stayed silent, taking mental notes, cataloging every glance, every subtle gesture, every laugh that didn't include me. And all the while, the scent of flowers and food from the hall teased me, a cruel reminder of what I was missing. I had a front row seat to the celebration, and yet I felt entirely disconnected from it. That day, the kitchen wasn't just a room. It was a symbol, A quiet message I wasn't meant to be seen that I didn't move from that corner of the kitchen for what felt like hours. Part of me wanted to disappear completely, to sink into the shadows and pretend I wasn't there. But another part couldn't tear my eyes away from the celebration I was being kept from. From my vantage point, I could see everything: my sister laughing with her friends, the groomsmen joking around, the parents giving their speeches. Everyone looked so alive. And there I was, a ghost with a lukewarm coffee in my hand, pretending to busy myself with a stack of napkins I didn't even need. That I noticed the glances first, subtle, almost imperceptible at first. A smirk here, a quick whisper there. People who normally smiled at me didn't, and those who had barely acknowledged me now seemed to go out of their way to ignore me. My stomach twisted. Was I imagining it? I kept asking myself, but deep down I knew. I wasn't just overlooked. I was being sidelined, and it hurt more than I expected it to. There was this creeping sense of invisibility, like I was watching my life pass by from behind a glass wall. I kept telling myself, it's just one day, one stupid wedding, but the words sounded hollow. Even as I thought them, that a memory flashed suddenly. Another family gathering, years ago, when I had spent hours preparing a presentation for relatives, only for everyone to gush over my sister's new shoes. I had forced my smile then, too, quietly filing the slide away in a mental folder labeled Notice Too Late. I realized now that folder had been growing for decades. That I tried to focus on small things to distract myself. The shimmer of her dress under the chandelier, the sound of laughter rolling across the hall, the faint scent of perfume mixing with fresh flowers. Each detail was beautiful, and each one a reminder that I didn't belong. At some point, my hands started fidgeting, twisting a napkin, tapping my fingers on the counter. I could feel my jaw tighten. It wasn't anger yet. Not fully. It was just this quiet, simmering resentment that had been building for years. And in that quiet, I began to notice everything. The whispered jokes, the way my seat had been positioned out of sight, the way my presence seemed almost inconvenient to everyone else. That I kept replaying it all in my mind, like a slow-motion film I couldn't pause. And with every frame, the hurt turned sharper, more pointed. I realized something then. I wasn't just sad or embarrassed. I was beginning to understand just how deeply this exclusion had been practiced, how carefully it had been orchestrated, and how powerless I felt in that moment. And yet, buried beneath that powerless feeling, there was a spark. A little voice whispering, "You're not done yet. You don't have to accept this." But I didn't act on it, not yet. For now, I just watched. That I thought I had grown used to it. The sidelines, the whispers, the invisible seating arrangement. I told myself it was just one day, that maybe they didn't realize what they were doing. But then it happened. The moment that made everything crystal clear. It was a single comment, tossed casually across the room, like a pebble dropped into water, rippling through everything. One of my relatives, someone I'd always respected, laughed and said something about how obviously she deserves the spotlight. My sister, of course, and then added, almost as an afterthought, "I guess some people are just background characters." Background characters. Those words hit me like a fist to the chest. I could feel my coffee cup slip slightly in my hand, the warmth spilling over my fingers, but I didn't care. I barely even noticed the sting of it. My brain went numb for a second, trying to process whether I had actually heard what I thought I had. But I had. Every word, every inflection dripping with condescension. And just like that, it wasn't just a kitchen anymore. It wasn't just a wedding. It was a statement. A declaration that my presence didn't matter, that my achievements didn't count, that I, the person who had worked tirelessly for my career, the one who had sacrificed, the one who had shown up countless times, was officially invisible in this family's narrative. That I remember my mind flashing back, involuntarily, to other moments of being passed over, dismissed, overlooked. The promotions at work that went to someone else, even when I'd done the heavy lifting. The dinners where my sister's accomplishments were applauded while mine were ignored. Every slight, every dismissal, every moment I had swallowed my pride and smiled. It all came rushing back in a tidal wave of clarity. That I could feel my chest tighten, my fingers curling around the edge of the counter as if gripping it would somehow ground me. A cold, hollow rage started to bubble beneath the surface, the kind that makes your hands tremble just slightly, the kind that sharpens every nerve. I realized, in that instant, that this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an oversight. It was intentional that I wanted to yell, to storm into the hall and confront everyone, to demand recognition for myself. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I felt my mind start to shift from shock, from hurt, to a kind of simmering clarity. The anger settled into something actionable, a plan forming in the back of my head like a quiet drumbeat. That pebble, that comment, it had done its work. It had lit the fuse. And deep down, I knew that my next steps would change everything, in ways they could never predict. That I left the kitchen quietly, almost slipping out unnoticed, though I'm sure someone caught. My retreat. The hall was alive with laughter and music, a world I no longer felt part of. Outside, the night air was cool against my face, a sharp contrast to the suffocating warmth of the reception. I leaned against the railing for a moment, letting the breeze wash over me, trying to clear my head. But nothing cleared. Not really. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. The comment, the smirks, the way I had been placed, intentionally tucked away as if I were part of the furniture. And the more I thought about it, the more it became obvious. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was a pattern. Years of being overlooked, of my accomplishments quietly ignored, of my presence minimized. Walking down the empty street, the faint hum of distant traffic around me, I began to see the parallels between my personal and professional life. All the effort I had poured into my career, the long nights, the relentless focus, it had earned me respect in some places, yes, but here, with my family, recognition was never going to come. I realized then that the wedding was symbolic, just the latest reminder that I had been undervalued for far too long. And that thought shifted something inside me. It wasn't just hurt anymore. It was a quiet, simmering resolve. I had spent so long being polite, being patient, waiting for acknowledgement that would never come. But now, for the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of control. I could decide. I could act. And I would. That I sat on a bench under a dim streetlight, hands pressed to my face as the emotions churned inside me. Guilt, anger, sadness, determination, all tangled together. I replayed my career milestones, the moments when I had poured every ounce of energy into building something meaningful. And I realized, bitterly but clearly, that the respect I craved here, in this family, in this kitchen, was something I would never receive passively. I had to claim it, and on my own terms. The idea came, quiet at first, almost a whisper: the company contract. My professional leverage. A tool I'd built through years of diligence, dedication, and risk. And if I chose to act, I could finally demonstrate, not through words, not through polite smiles, that I mattered. That my work, my contributions, and my presence were not invisible. That I took a deep breath, letting the weight of that realization settle in. This wasn't vengeance, exactly. It wasn't even about hurting anyone. It was about respect, boundaries, claiming my agency in a world that had, for too long, ignored me. By the time I returned to the quiet apartment I had rented for the weekend, the decision was made. I would not remain a background character any longer. Not in this wedding, not in my family's eyes, and certainly not in my professional life. Something had shifted that night, a clarity that had been years in the making. I sat alone in my apartment, the hum of the city outside barely registering as my mind raced. The decision I'd made wasn't easy, and suddenly, the weight of it pressed down on me. I had clarity, yes, but clarity comes with its own kind of fear. Am I really ready to do this? I asked myself over and over. The words, terminate the contract, had a cold finality to them, and I felt the gravity in my chest like a stone. That I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting the quiet stretch out around me. For years, I'd been the kind of person who swallowed my anger, who smiled through disappointment, who endured slights without complaint. That self, the polite, deferential version of me, had been safe, predictable, but also invisible. And now, it was gone. The internal debate started quietly, almost imperceptibly. Is this too far? Will it hurt people unnecessarily? Am I crossing a line I can't come back from? Each thought sparked a counterpoint, louder, sharper. No, it's not about revenge. It's about fairness. It's about respect. It's about finally standing up for myself. That I thought back to every time I had been overlooked. The promotions that passed me by at work, the praise that always went to someone else, the subtle family comments that whispered I wasn't enough. They weren't just memories anymore. They were evidence, a roadmap of why I couldn't stay quiet any longer. And yet, fear lingered, as fear always does. Fear of judgment, of backlash, of feeling the cold shock of doing something that couldn't be undone. I felt my hands clench, then release, pacing the small space of my apartment as my mind wrestled with every angle, every possible outcome. Then a memory broke through, sharp and clear. My old mentor, sitting me down years ago after a minor setback at work. Sometimes, they had said, you have to remind the world you're here. Not aggressively, not maliciously, but firmly. Don't let them write your story without your input. Those words, spoken long ago, now felt like a guiding light. I closed my eyes and pictured the contract on my desk, the emails lined up, the opportunity to act. It wasn't about proving anything to my sister or the relatives at the wedding or anyone else. It was about proving to myself that I had a voice, that I could demand acknowledgement, that I could draw a line and respect it. By the time I opened my eyes, the storm of doubt had settled into a focused determination. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't acting out of spite. I was acting to reclaim control over my life, my work, and my worth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt aligned. The confrontation within was over. I was ready. I woke up that morning with a strange sense of calm, the kind that only comes when a decision has settled into your bones. The anger from the wedding hadn't gone away. It had transformed into something sharper, more focused. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was preparing to act. I went straight to my office, the hum of the fluorescent lights blending with the steady click of my keyboard. Emails, spreadsheets, contracts, everything I had spent years building, now felt like ammunition. The company contract, the one I had nurtured and protected, was no longer just a business tool. It was a statement, a declaration that I mattered, that my contributions weren't invisible, that my presence had weight. That I paused before hitting send, staring at the screen as if it were a mirror reflecting all the moments that had led me here. The overlooked promotions, the ignored successes, the subtle family dismissals, they weren't just memories anymore. They were fuel. Each one had built a fire that was now ready to burn through the barriers of indifference. Hands steady, heart racing, I drafted the termination notice. Every word was deliberate, measured, precise. There was no need for drama, no need for theatrics. This wasn't about revenge. It was about asserting boundaries, about reclaiming the respect I had been denied for so long. I hit send and felt a quiet, almost wicked satisfaction. The die had been cast, the confirmation pinged back. I leaned back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. There was a thrill in knowing I had acted decisively, in knowing that the invisible me was finally seen, at least in this domain. The office, the contracts, the business world, these were my arenas. Here, my worth was measurable, undeniable, and respected. A flashback came unbidden, a memory of my mentor's voice echoing in my mind. Sometimes, you have to remind the world you're here. I had reminded them, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: power. Not the cruel, vengeful kind, but the kind that comes from knowing your value and refusing to let anyone erase it. Even as I felt that satisfaction, a quiet ripple of doubt tugged at me.
Did I go too far? Was this too much? I pushed it aside. The lesson had been learned, the boundary established, and in a strange way, I felt liberated. Like I had shed a layer of myself that had spent years shrinking to fit into spaces I wasn't
Meant to occupy. By the end of the day, the contract was terminated, the message delivered, and I allowed myself a small, private smile. It wasn't vindictive. It was reclamation, a statement that I mattered, and I was done being sidelined. The kitchen at my sister's wedding had been a symbol of exclusion. Now, this action was a symbol of acknowledgement, from me, for me. The response came faster than I expected. At first, it was subtle, an email ping here, a phone vibration there, little ripples in the calm surface I had worked so hard to maintain. But soon enough, the reactions hit like waves, some predictable, some surprising, all impossible to ignore. Colleagues reached out with questions, confusion, even a touch of panic. Their words were careful, hesitant, some apologetic, some defensive. I watched their attempts to navigate the sudden shift in power, the disruption I had orchestrated, and I felt a quiet satisfaction settle in. For years, I had been polite, patient, waiting for recognition. Now, recognition had come in a form I hadn't needed anyone else to authorize. Then came the family reactions, indirect but palpable. I caught glimpses in group chats, the carefully measured tones in phone calls. Some were shocked, some judgmental, a few quietly impressed. I could almost hear the unspoken acknowledgement. She finally drew her line. It wasn't universal praise, not by a long shot, but it was recognition, and that, I realized, was enough. Still, a part of me lingered in doubt. Was I too harsh? Did I burn bridges I shouldn't have? I felt the tiny pangs of guilt, those faint echoes of old habits, the urge to apologize, to smooth over, to make peace. But I resisted. For the first time, I understood that standing up for myself didn't require validation from anyone else. It required only my own clarity and courage. That I found myself replaying the wedding again, ironically, as if seeing it through this new lens could somehow make sense of it all. The kitchen, the whispers, the exclusion, they now felt like pieces of a puzzle that had led me to this point. What once had felt like humiliation now felt like a catalyst, a spark that ignited a transformation I hadn't known I needed. Even as the initial satisfaction and vindication settled in, I noticed a subtle shift within me. The tension that had coiled in my chest for years, all those moments of being overlooked, of being minimized, was beginning to unravel. I wasn't just responding to the past. I was reclaiming my narrative, reshaping it on my own terms. And yet, the fallout wasn't finished. People would talk. Opinions would form. Some would admire, some would criticize. But for the first time, I realized I didn't need their approval. I had acted in alignment with my worth, and that was enough. The world could react however it pleased. I had my peace. That I sat back, letting the weight of everything sink in, feeling a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and a flicker of lingering tension, the kind that always accompanies meaningful change. The ripple effects were already spreading, and I knew life would never look exactly the same. But that was okay. It was supposed to be that way. It took a few days before I could finally sit with myself without the adrenaline of action still pulsing through my veins. The contract was terminated, the ripples were spreading, and the initial reactions had settled into a dull hum. For the first time, I could think clearly, really think, about what had happened and what it all meant. I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to fully feel before. It wasn't just about the wedding, the kitchen, or the exclusion. It had never been just that. All those moments of being overlooked, dismissed, minimized, they weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern that had quietly shaped my life, my confidence, and my sense of self-worth. And now, finally, I had acknowledged it. I had acted, sitting in my apartment, sunlight spilling softly through the blinds. I let myself feel the emotions I had pushed aside for so long. Relief, satisfaction, pride, and yes, even a touch of guilt. Guilt, not for what I had done, but for the years I had let small injustices chip away at me without protest. I thought about the little victories I'd achieved silently, the efforts that had gone unseen, and I realized they mattered to me. That was enough. I thought back to my sister, to that wedding, to the kitchen where I had been hidden. And I understood, finally, that my value didn't hinge on where I was seated or whether someone clapped for me. My worth wasn't determined by anyone else's recognition. It was in my actions, my integrity, and my courage to stand up for myself. The emotional weight of all those past slights began to lift, replaced by a quiet, profound sense of clarity. I saw how much of my life I had spent shrinking to fit into spaces that weren't meant for me, and I vowed, silently but firmly, never to do that again. I owed myself that respect, that acknowledgement, that sense of presence. A small, private smile curved my lips as I reflected on the transformation. The anger, the hurt, the exclusion, they had all been catalysts, forcing me to confront what I had ignored for too long. And through that confrontation, I had grown. I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been quietly eroding for years. Even with the satisfaction of asserting my boundaries, I recognized that life wasn't going to change overnight. Family dynamics, professional relationships, and old habits would continue to ripple through my life. But I felt ready now, ready to navigate those waves with confidence, ready to protect my worth, and ready to refuse the roles that others tried to impose on me. For the first time in years, I felt whole in my own eyes. I had acted, I had claimed my agency, and I had looked the world and myself squarely in the face. The reckoning was over. The real work had begun, living fully in my own space, unafraid, unapologetic, and self-respecting. It took some time, but eventually, the dust settled. The emails stopped pinging, the murmurs died down, and the initial shock faded into memory. I had watched the ripples of my actions spread, and in the quiet aftermath, I finally felt what I hadn't allowed myself to feel before: peace. Sitting in my apartment one morning, sunlight streaming through the blinds, I reflected on everything: the wedding, the kitchen, the contract, and all the moments in between. I realized that my journey wasn't just about being sidelined at a wedding or asserting professional authority. It was about claiming myself, about recognizing that my value didn't need to be validated by anyone else. That I thought of my sister, the very reason this all started, and allowed myself a gentle smile. Our relationship was complicated, as all family relationships are, but it didn't need to be defined by exclusion or competition. I could love her, support her, and still honor my own boundaries. I didn't have to sacrifice my self-respect to maintain family harmony. Looking back, I saw the wedding differently now. The kitchen, once a symbol of humiliation, became a kind of catalyst, a turning point. It had forced me to confront years of being minimized, and in doing so, it pushed me to act. And act I did. I had drawn a line, reclaimed my voice, and asserted my presence in ways that finally felt authentic. I walked through the city streets that evening, letting the warm glow of streetlights brush against my skin, and felt something I hadn't in years: lightness. The tension, the resentment, the invisible weight of being overlooked, it had lifted. I carried with me the lessons, the clarity, and most importantly, a newfound confidence in my own worth. Life, I realized, wouldn't always be fair. People would continue to make assumptions, draw lines, and sometimes try to diminish others. But now, I knew my response. I had proven to myself that I could act decisively, that I could protect my boundaries, and that I could honor my worth without apology. The future felt open, uncharted, and full of possibility. Opportunities at work, moments with family, and choices for myself. All of it now felt richer because I knew I was standing firmly in my own narrative. I wasn't just a background character anymore. I was present, seen, and accountable to no one but myself. As I paused at the top of a quiet hill, city lights flickering below, I smiled again. Not out of triumph, not out of revenge, but out of clarity, empowerment, and peace. The past had shaped me, but it no longer controlled me. I had taken my place in the story, fully, unapologetically, and finally free.